The name Titebond is well known in the woodworking community for their wood glues, but did you know that they have other impressive product lines? Titebond's construction adhesives and caulks and sealants are made with a professional in mind. Builders and contractors depend on Titebond to deliver the most consistent and high-performing construction adhesives for their projects, including the industry's #1 FRP adhesive. Titebond's line of caulks and sealants ensure unbeatable adhesion for a wide variety of applications and weather conditions, with the most comprehensive color matching program in the industry. To see Titebond's complete variety of products, visit their website at titebond.com.
The percentage of homes that were modularly built compared to site-built, the number of modular homes peaked in around 68, 69, 70, over 50 years ago. And it has been diminishing. Now it's been going up a little bit. It hasn't reached the level that it did in that period of time. I don't know what the trigger were back then, whether it was a labor shortage or they had reached that cost efficiency. Modulars still do not make up a big percentage of all the homes that are built.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Senior Editor Brian Pontalillo.
Hey, everyone.
Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor Mike Gerton.
Hello.
And our producer, Andres Semaniego.
Hello there.
Please email your questions to FHBpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Pleasure to see you guys this morning as always. Thanks for being here.
No matter how many times we do this, when you introduce us, I think you're going to just keep going through the names, but you wait for us to say hello.
Well, I think it's nice to greet our listeners, and
I agree. It just takes me by surprise every time.
Well, maybe in the 700th time we've done this show, we'll have it all figured out by then. Let's hope. Let's start with you, Andres. You've been busy working on. It looks like you're building a cabinet.
Yeah, I'm building a part of a cabinet that is going for my walk-in closet. I'm going to do some shelving and next, like maybe 4 cabinets. So I've been building those, late last night, along with my dad, and just testing out new tools and the track saw that I got recently. And Mike suggested I should get a longer track.
Yes, you should. I saw that video, Andres.
So Instagram, right? What's your Instagram handle? Folks should check this out.
At EL_Paul Andres. It's not that long.
All right. Well, it looks like you were doing a woodworking magazine video shoot there. It was quite impressive, I gotta say. Mike's nodding. And we observed you're using radiata pine plywood from the home center.
Yeah.
And Brian and I were talking ahead of the show. We both use that product and think it's pretty good.
It's pretty consistent. It's pretty good. I only have to search for the ones that are not chipped on the sides and stuff. As always, I move them around, get them, and then put it back in the shelf. So I don't mess up the next guy. And it's been pretty consistent. Not only that, but it's also cheaper, and I'm not wasting a lot of money and messing up. I
think it's beautiful too. It's got a rotary cut, which gives it the kind of that look of waves. But it's really good looking. What do you think, Brian?
I like it. I think it. I was like you mentioned, Patrick. We were talking about it before the show, and I said that it's one of the things I can get at the Home Depot that's usually very consistent. I've used it for a bunch of different stuff. In fact, I picked up 3 sheets of it last weekend for some more cabinetry around here. And I might be getting into Master Closet too with these 3 sheets, depending on how far it goes, because I have to do the same project. But I like it. I've left it. I've finished it with just a clear coat because I like the look of it. And if you do sort through the sheets, you can usually find a few of them that don't have. Because a lot of them are filled, right? Where there's a void in the veneer, they fill it with some. I'm not sure
Bondo.
what they use exactly, but Bondo looking stuff. But if you sort through the stack just a little bit, you can usually find some sheets that don't have that, or it's near the edges where you can easily clip it off when you're breaking down the sheets. So I think it's good stuff. for the right purpose.
What do you think, Mike?
I agree.
And
That's really all that needs to be said when Mike agrees.
We don't need to go into all repeat anybody. So yeah, we're all target on.
What have you been working
under
on, Mike?
$50, right?
Yeah, it's about that.
Yeah.
What'd you pay, Andres? Do you remember?
I think it was $49 a sheet.
Yeah.
So I bought 2 sheets, and I recently ordered a new track saw guide that I'm waiting for before I rip the other one.
Mike, what's your project list looking like?
Well, I'm back in Rhode Island, so it's looking around the yard, noticing all the stuff that needs to get done from the winter wind and weather and rain and snow and everything. So that'll be a chore. But my last night's task, or at least prepping for it, is we have these. The front of my house faces south, and we have these a window wall, and literally it's glass about 9 feet high and about 16 feet wide between patio doors and transoms. So you can imagine it feels pretty cold to your body in the evening when the glass temperature goes down. So when we built the house, we got cellular shades. So they've been there for 27 years, and they're internal cords, and they snapped, 2 of them, when we rolled them up. So now I'm trying to find parts, sourcing parts for replacing those cords. And boy, it's hard to find parts for a 26-year-old set of shades. They changed their mechanisms, and they changed their cords and the cord diameter, and that's not the information they give you when you get the original catalog. It just shows you how to install it. It doesn't show you the how to make repairs to it. I guess they intend you to spend another $900 and buy another shade or something.
Well, and I think folks would say that, styles change within 25 years, and, if someone's going to want new shades, but as you point out, they're very expensive.
Yeah, insane.
So have you had any success fixing these blinds?
Well, about 7 years ago, I had a couple of the cords inside. They're flat cords, which is weird. They're not like a round braided cord. They're a flat, like about a 3/16 wide, and like a 160 or a 64 thick. And I took them apart. I found the parts like 7 years ago. Of course, I think I bought enough cord to redo everything, but I can't remember where the heck I put the rest of the spools. So first it'll be hunting, and last night I spent an hour and a half online trying to track down a source, and I think I found one on eBay that would work. But we'll see.
That's really interesting. Keep me posted. I'm guessing most folks would say, "Oh my gosh, this is overwhelming," but you're diving right in there, which is pretty cool. Brian, what have you been working on? Fine home building stuff on the homestead? What have you been doing?
But I have been this week. I have been editing an article on installing pocket doors with this really modern trim detail. Actually, like a casingless, casing-free kind of trim for these pocket doors, and it's been pretty all-consuming. It's Casey Knips, who is a new fine home building author. I saw his work first on Instagram, and I reached out to him and let him know that we'd love to work with him if he ever had something he wanted to write about. We kicked around a few ideas, and this is what we came up with. And this article is, I think, just going to be really exciting to anyone who installs pocket doors regularly, and just in terms of choosing hardware, making the pocket doors operate really well, and also a kind of a really nice looking detail for the trim. The pocket door is just clean lines and a little reveal at the top of the door. It looks like it's unattached above the jamb. So that's what I've been working on this week. And he even spoiler alert, he even used these clips so that the jambs aren't fastened. They're clipped to the framing so that then he can easily remove them to get access to the track, the hardware above the door, and even the little T-guide What I won't share, you'll have to read the article for us to find out what his thoughts were at the end on the clips and whether or not he would use them again.
Was this his first time using those clips?
Yeah, when he developed the detail for this project, he really thought, like, wouldn't it be great if... Mike, let me just say simply, no, it's not his first time using the clips. It's his first time using the clips for this purpose. Yeah, and when he developed the detail, he thought, wouldn't it be great for pocket doors if you could pop these jambs off, especially because these are, I think they're 1 3/8 inch jambs. So they're wide, and so they hide a lot of the door and hide a lot of the hardware. So he thought, wouldn't it be great if I could pop it off and access this stuff? And so he gave it a try.
Every carpenter listening is come up against faulty pocket doors in their career, I'm sure, and making them work later is always a challenge.
Yeah.
I was talking with someone just Monday about having something that you can put on and remove, and this was for a flooring trim, like a transition strip. And what they did is they used a very low profile Velcro, which I thought was pretty good. And I said, now, is it going to stay there? He goes, well, it's been there 3 years now and it's never come off. I said, well, will it come off? He goes, I'll let you know in a couple days. So he's going to try taking it off just to see. I thought, another alternative for, if you do need, and I've run into this with like baseboard pieces that are covering an electrical junction box or something, which you have to have access to, and making something, clips or some other device that you can take it off easily, better than driving screws in and then trying to find them after you've puttied them over.
We were talking about this. Go ahead, Patrick.
I was going to say it might be urban legend, but I've heard that a lot of office space and professional space have moldings put in place with Velcro, and you guys are nodding. I guess that, yeah.
Well, I don't know. I've never heard the Velcro tip before, but we were talking about yesterday in our content meeting about a project that is designed to be. The designer was hoping to do some future proofing, and by future proofing, I mean that they were hoping that they could solve some problems for accessibility to things like mechanicals and whatnot, so that as repairs were needed, as updates were needed, it became simpler to do. And it reminded me of a presentation that I've seen Ted Benson give a number of times on this sort of, I think he calls it like open building concept or something to that degree, where he kind of takes these ideas from commercial construction, applies them to residential construction, so that houses become really flexible without sledgehammers and pry bars. Like, you can really rearrange spaces, access mechanicals. And I think one of the things he does hides a lot of stuff and chases behind baseboard and other trim. It seems wise.
Yeah, and I think it would be more common if it didn't add to cost, right? Like things are already crazy expensive, and then you have to build in ways to access it later that cost more. I was going to mention briefly, I think I told you all last week on a video shoot with Hudson Valley Preservation, HVP, in Kent, Connecticut. And when I was there doing a blower door test on their new office space, I was talking to Luke de Blasi, who is one of the principals in de Blasi painting. And somewhat offhandedly, we started this conversation about folks who do trade work. And Luke's observation was that there are strong starters. There are folks who are strong in the middle part, the greater part of the project, and then there are folks he described as strong finishers. And I thought that was really interesting. And the older I get, the more these things kind of resonate with me. What makes someone good at their job? What makes them like their work? And have you guys observed that in trade work or in editorial work, Brian? Mike, you want to go first? You were nodding.
Yeah, I know just what you mean. In fact, I read an article about it, and it was for the construction industry, and it was if you're hiring people and assessing them with a questionnaire and trying to get to the idea that he was mentioning, where somebody who's a good starter, like they'd like to jump in on the job and get things going, But then as things drag on, they kind of lose interest and
right? You
drift
get bored.
off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then those middle people, and then the people who like to wrap up, and it's building your team around people that either are straight through from start to finish and don't fall off at any one of those points, or have supplemental people that, the people who go in and get the job going, and the people who can carry it along, and then the wrap-up crew, I guess you could call it, and build your business around that. So yeah, it's interesting you bring it up that I just read about that.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, in all the trade work that I've done, I feel like I haven't had a choice but to be all those things, because I always had a boss telling me what to do. I never worked for myself, except for just small here and there side projects. But I definitely know the feeling of the excitement of starting something, and I know for me how challenging it can get at a certain point to keep going. I tend to get excited again at the end, as things are starting to look really like they're coming together. But it also reminds me of Justin Fink, and someone had written in recently asking what everyone's up to. The people who emeritus of the podcast, what they're up to. And so, Justin's now working in the field, but when he was working at the magazine, and Justin's a person who can't control himself when it comes to projects. And he'd have 4 projects going, and he'd wake up on a Saturday morning and decide his house needed a dormer and cut a hole in the roof. So I don't know if he's changed his ways, but Justin was clearly one of those great starters.
I had to ask myself, what if you're good at none of those stages? What do you do then? I've observed myself in the magazine biz. At a point I've looked at things so much and read them so many times. I stopped seeing stuff. I'm just not good at that. Some folks are really good at catching little things at the end, but I fully know that about myself. I am not.
Well, it's always interesting to be on projects. And Mike, you were one of the early in my time at Fine Homebuilding. You were one of the first people that brought. They kind of, without telling me this, I kind of observed it in you, and now I've seen it in other carpenters and tradespeople. It's really amazing the tradespeople who have sort of they can see steps coming. They can sort of see the whole picture of the project, and they're planning. In fact, Mike's great at that. And Casey, who I was talking about before, who did this pocket door article, when I was on the photo shoot with him, it was great because he was telling me, I'm going to do this now, and in a few minutes you'll see why I'm doing this, why I'm taking so much care to get this right now. So he could really see how what he was doing, and this was one project, but it applies to building a whole house, the entirety of home building, right? Being able to see what's coming and doing your work in a way that you're setting yourself up for
success.
Success and smooth work later on. Yeah.
I think some of the best people at remodeling or building are good at with people who run crews of others under them they're the ones that are thinking just like that, where they're thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, but they're also good at explaining it to the people that they're working with, so that the younger people or the less skilled people can you're priming them. So you're not just saying, do this, do that. You're saying, okay, we're going to do these steps now because it's going to save us time later. And then they're ready to, start to execute those things on their own. It's kind of like they learn it by osmosis, but just with a little bit of priming.
Well, any of you listening who have thoughts on this subject or any other, I would hope you'd write in like you do. And once again, if you have wrote in with a question or feedback, thanks very much for that. One person we heard from was Jason Webster of Huntington Homes, and he wrote in regarding our conversation about off-site construction. He writes, Patrick, I should send you my dash cam video of me reacting to your response to episode 622's question on prefab. I think you're right that custom homes should be built by custom home builders and tract homes should be built by tract home builders. But what you didn't mention is the very large group of people that don't want tract and can't afford custom, Prefab is a great solution for these people. They need a factory to pare down their decisions, and they need a more standardized approach to home building on their lots. And I think this was the question Michael was asking. Why hasn't a more standardized approach to home building gained traction? I'm going to stop right there for a second. Jason, I think you make a great point, especially when I started thinking about Vermont and other places with rural areas. You're likely going to have to build your own house, right? There's not going to be a tract developer there, so you're going to have to build what you can afford. And I think, as you suggest, this is a great solution for a bunch of people who kind of want a nice house and want a high-performing home, but can't afford to have a custom home builder build it. He says, why hasn't a more standardized approach to home building gained traction? I blame HGTV. Its very edited shows perpetuate the ideas that every build should and can be unique. But unless you have Chip and Joanna building your house, that's just not the way home building works. The main benefit of factory-built housing is standardization. Only with standardization can you lower costs and raise quality. I think that historically modular companies reached for custom builds because they felt they had to prove themselves and escape the reputation of their manufactured mobile home cousins. But there are handfuls of current modular companies that are focused on higher quality, lower cost, standardized builds. Keep up the good work, but please give Prefab some love. Well, Jason, I think you spoke better than I could on the subject. What do you guys think?
Modular is what he's talking about in prefab, and I think you can, so I've investigated and worked with modular companies, the manufacturers, on a number of occasions going back to the late 80s, and if you can, the shipping costs can be very expensive. That would increase the cost of the build where it's not competitive with what you could get a local builder to build it for. But if you're in an area where you can deal directly with the modular company and you're equipped to get the foundation in, get the excavation done, get all your two utilities hooked up, they're not a turnkey operation. They just build all of the modules that get delivered to the site. So there's a little bit more involved. When I've costed out hiring a local company which is already connected with a modular company, in other words, they have their own set crew, they'll get the foundation done, they'll do all those turnkey elements. When you do a cost comparison to custom build, I haven't found them to be any savings. So I think it depends, on the situation. Mm-hmm. But it's something to investigate. Yep. But for definitely.
So I was talking to Carol about Jason's email, and she said, I want him to build our house in Vermont. And I was like, well, that's pretty good testimony. She's familiar with the products, and they are well done. They do a nice house. And I would be happy to have it, that much further along to finish it without having to worry about damage to the interior while it's being built. Joe writes in on the same subject. Hey, FHB team, this is a response to episode 622 factory-built housing topic. I believe the future for housing innovation will be factory-built components assembled in the field, much like the auto industry manufactures components in many different plants and then assembles the car at the assembly plant. So the assembly plant has a big vote as to whether or not innovations get adopted. Some factory-built house components have already been adopted, and the innovation is diffused into the home building industry workflow. For example, pre-engineered roof trusses and ready-made cabinets. Other building component innovations are not widely diffused into our everyday workflow due to the builder's view, not the manufacturer's. Builders won't adopt an innovation if it doesn't give them a relative advantage, if it's not compatible with their abilities, or if it's too complex. The builder must be able to try the innovation without a large capital investment and must have observable, tangible results. A good example of this is panelized floors and walls. They're available, however, not part of everyday workflow for much of the above reasons. For the home building industry to improve, innovators and manufacturers have to think more like builders and less like architects and engineers. I recently patented an idea for a below-grade wall system that satisfies all 5 factors that influence the adoption of a product. There's a relative advantage. It has compatibility with existing systems. It's not complex. It's tryable without a big investment. and the results are observable. I believe my idea meets all these factors, but I have not been able to find a manufacturer/innovator in our industry that looks ideas through the builder's lens. Just my thoughts. Sincerely, Joe. You guys may have guessed Joe is an engineer. He says that he is willing to give up his patent if anyone wants to try and develop his below-grade wall system. Do you guys think those are... Have you heard these criteria for a technology being adopted in an industry? I hadn't. It makes sense. What do you think, Brian?
I think that it all sounds good. What both of these listeners have said, it all sounds good, and I think it will all come to fruition when it is economically viable. And I think that's what it comes down to. And one of the things that when we talk about modular and factory built housing, we're talking about mostly framing, right? The framing is the big part of the process, and depending on for a floor system, for example, that's all it is. It's framing, unless it's an insulated floor. For walls, as we've talked about on the show before, it could be anything from just a panelized framed wall to an almost completed wall that's shipped to the site. More so in modular than panelized. You have insulation and finishes in the walls and whatnot. I think though what we're talking about is something that's already very efficiently done on site. So it's going to take a real significant improvement to make it economically viable. And I don't know what that improvement is. I don't know if it's an improvement in the factories become the factory. Maybe it's volume. Maybe when the factories actually have enough volume and get big enough, then all of a sudden they can buy big materials in bulk, or they can lower their prices just by volume. I'm not sure what will change the economics of it, but I think it will change when the economics change.
I looked at some statistics a number of years ago, or just some the percentage of homes that were modularly built compared to site built, and the number of modular homes peaked in around 68, 69, 70. In other words, over 50 years ago. And it has been diminishing. Now it's been going up a little bit, but it hasn't reached the level that it did in that period of time. I don't know what the triggers were back then, whether it was a labor shortage or they had reached that cost efficiency. But yeah, the modulars still do not make up a big percentage of all the homes that are built. I think most of them are still built by tract home builders. I took some photographs last week of a neighborhood where they were doing the tract homes, and it's like, I got to share them with you, maybe for the next podcast. But you could just see there was two slabs being prepped adjacent to two slabs that were all roughed in, with the rough utilities, because these were slab on grade homes with the plumbing and so on. And then next to two freshly poured slabs that morning, next to two homes that are in framing stages. And it's just like you could walk down this street and see every stage of construction. And they moved really quickly. I was figuring they were rolling out a house from start to finish in about a month and a half.
So it's
rating to.
So they're working like you would in a factory. It's like an open air factory. Yeah.
And you don't have the cost of the factory, right? Or the panel or modular handling equipment, right? It's the people are moving, not the stuff.
I don't think I think it's safe to say that like any of the comments that any of us have made on the show about factory built houses, modular houses, panelized houses, it's not no one's got a bone to pick with the quality or anything like that or the idea. It just seems like it just seems like a change that's going to be a hard one if it ever comes. I mean, it's been, like Mike said, it peaked a long time ago. It's been every including Fine Homebuilding, every media outlet has published an article, probably one a year, on factory built homes being the thing of the future, and it's just a future that's not arriving. And I think it comes down to the economics.
Yep, I agree. agree.
Ben Bogie wrote in, we were talking to Will Brown about his project that had the slab wood framed walls, and we suggested I think I described it as a witness window, a way to look in there to see the beautiful lumber that's holding this house up. And Ben Bogie wrote in, this is a house I renovated a number of years back where we did exactly what y'all said, found these beautiful board walls and chose to highlight them on an interior wall, enclosed the wall in 1/2-inch thick tempered glass, and it's hinged so you can swing it open and keep it clean. And I think it's awesome. I would never leave the bathroom because I would be staring at this beautiful framing from, it looked like chestnut to me. It was super cool.
And they're just live edge boards that were run between, it's a partition wall, obviously, and it's just like a 1-inch slabs of wood running vertically, and then the metal lath running horizontally, and then all the plaster keys, the little goop that slides through between the lath, just smudge through, and you can see it all exposed. And when I saw the picture that Ben sent, the first thing that came to mind is I can't count the number of homes where I've ripped out those walls and threw all that lumber in the dumpster, and here it's an architectural feature.
Yeah.
What destruction I did over the years of tearing that out.
Yeah, it looks really cool. That was a great idea, Ben.
It's fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I've always said that, we close up the beautiful parts of the house with the crappy stuff like drywall and and floor coverings, right?
For sure. I mean, I remember we published when we were doing the Houses Awards, we published a Matt Reisinger project where they had done all. I mean, Matt's in an easier climate to do this in because he's in Austin, Texas, but they did all the control layers outside of the walls, and they just left the framing exposed and painted it all white. And they did use board sheething, but otherwise it was common framing, right? This was nothing historic or old or nice. It was 2x4s and headers, but they just they worked to hide some things, and to not blow out any nails or anything. So they had to be a little bit careful with the framing, but they just painted the house white and it looked great.
It's an architectural tradition you see on beach houses, right? Especially on the northern part of the eastern seaboard. And Mike's nodding because he knows what I'm talking about. It's just like there was nothing to. That was it. That was the house. It was seasonal. Yeah. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
There was no electric, no anything. You went in and you might have brought your propane lantern or something, and that was your illumination. Yeah, pretty rustic.
And Patrick, you mentioned witness windows, and that is, I think that is a traditional thing in straw bale houses. To somewhere in the house leave a little window that you see the straw bales. I've been in a few straw bale houses where I've seen that detail.
It's how you explain to your friends what you got going on, right? Because they can't imagine what your house
straw
is made
bales.
of, right? Yeah. What?
Yeah.
This comes from Ben H. And he says, good afternoon. In episode 6121, you discussed a listener's question about building a home inside a Quonset hut. We're living in a variation of that. I somehow convinced my wife to move our family, me, two teenage daughters, into an RV parked inside a steel building. I concluded that we would save money and time compared to renting if we lived in a camper inside a metal building that I would have to build on our property while I built the house. She agreed, poor woman. The first 3 weeks were fun. The other year and a half and going have been less fun. Meanwhile, instead of a home, we've accumulated a half-built house, a very nice chicken coop, a flock of chickens, geese and ducks, and 4 goats. Not sure we're saving time or money, but it has been an adventure. And that is the real reason to do it, Ben. Good for you. He's going to have one heck of a shop, though, when he finally gets that house built 10 years from now. Right, Ben?
Yeah.
Oh, boy, it's time to get to a question here. We've been listening or hearing from our listeners, which is super awesome, but we got to get on here. This comes from Ben H. We did that one. This comes from Greg. Hello, FHB crew. I'm currently building a small A-frame cabin in Red River Gorge, Kentucky. While working inside during massive rainstorm, I noticed a fair amount of water coming in the front door from blowing rain. The door is installed on a 2x4 wall that is covered with OSB, Tyvek house wrap and board and batten siding, I added a cap flashing above the door that tucks behind the house wrap. The gap between the studs and door has been spray foamed, and the exterior of the door jamb was caulked with silicone to the siding. I'm trying to figure out where I went wrong on this install. Why is water coming in during heavy rain? It seems that the water is coming in at the bottom of the jamb on each side and also seems to be coming through the threshold seal. I've recently learned that a lot of these doors have an adjustable threshold, so I may be able to solve that part. What can I do to fix my water intrusion problem? Do I need to tear this apart and try again, or is there an easier fix that I'm missing? What could I have done differently from the start to avoid this in the first place? My guess is that I'm getting blowing rain running down behind the siding and behind the board and batten board and batten isn't exactly the most rain-resistant siding. Bonus points, if you can somehow work air sealing or attic venting into this conversation. I've added a couple pictures showing the leak water and also an exterior picture of the cabin so you can see what I'm working with. Thanks, Greg. Well, thank you, Greg. What do you guys think? What's going on, Mike?
So I zoomed in on the photo where the water is on the subfloor. And what I don't see is, and I didn't see him mention it in the description of how he detailed the exterior, I don't see a sill pan flashing under the door. Because in most cases, whether the water leak is coming from the outside or even if it's coming from the inside through the door bottom seal, a sill pan flashing with a back dam, which comes up on the inside, a vertical leg, would have collected that water and drained it out. So that would be the first question I'd want to know, because that might be what he missed and might need to take the door out and put it in a sill pan flashing.
If only we had a resource that described how to install a door with a sill pan flashing that we knew about. That would be amazing. Right? We've done this many times. And
Yeah.
What do you think, Brian? Is that a good conclusion?
Well, it's plausible for sure. Of course, Mike said it.
Don't give me that much credit.
There's still the question. I mean, but Mike, if I'm understanding you right, that sill pan flashing would direct has the potential to direct the water back out of the building no matter where the water's coming in. But that it doesn't necessarily answer where the water's coming in, which is always a mystery with leaks, right? And you know, you could, I mean, I think you could, you know, potentially take that door out, never see your leak, reinstall it, you know, the right way and not have a leak. I mean, they can be really hard to find. The board and batten siding, any vertical siding, does tend to direct water really quickly down towards windows and doors. And I've heard so many builders and remodelers, you know, caution, you know, that you need to be really diligent with when you have that type of siding with your flashing details. It sounds like, you know, he used using a cap flashing above the door, tucking it behind the WRB. That all seems to make sense. If he has to go back there and take it out, the only thing I would say is just to make sure that cap flashing is done really well, that you can do some extra taping with it. You can do some extra caulking with it, but often leaks come from window and door leaks often come from the top.
And to your point, Brian, that it's difficult to determine where those leaks are, though they are most likely to come from the top, but you never know because the water could get in at the top, and how does it travel in the wall?
Right.
What I've done is do a spray test with a high pressure hose. But what a lot of people do, and I don't understand, is they just spray water all over the place, which doesn't help. It only proves what you already know, which is that there's a leak somewhere. So the way to do a spray test is you start low on the door, and one of Greg's thoughts, is that it's coming through the door sweep at the threshold. If that's the case, just spray the heck out of that area and see what happens. And it is not just spray it for 30 seconds and done. This is like if a heavy rain caused this and that rain was ongoing for a couple of hours, you might have to spray that door for a good 20, 30 minutes to get it to get enough water leaking in so it duplicates what you see there that you experience. So spray the threshold, see if you're if that is the leak spot. Then work your way up on, say, the left side jamb, and just keep spraying up maybe in 1 foot increments for 15 or 20 minutes. Now, you don't want to stand there, so just hook up the hose on a ladder and strap it on with some duct tape and let it just spray, and go have lunch, and then come back and take a look at it, and then work your way up to the top, and then do the same on the right side, and then finally hit the very top. And then after you do each of these spray intervals of, say, 20 or 30 minutes, stop and take a break for 2 or 3 hours, because that water is going to take time to start doing its thing and leaking through. We do this a lot with roofs to determine where a leak is coming from. You work from the bottom up, and that way at least you've narrowed your search parameters on where you're going to, when you do take the door out or make some retrofit, figure out where you're going to spend your attention.
I mean, one more thing that I can think is just build a roof over the door. Problem solved. And you should have a roof over the door anyway, especially if it's a main entryway. So that when your guests arrive in the rain, they have a nice sheltered place to stand, and they will thank you.
Greg, I'm looking at the front elevation, and Mike, Brian, and Andres have seen me glance into my other monitor, and I'm looking at the octagonal window above your door and thinking that's a prime suspect too, because if it's leaking on the top of that, it's going to run potentially all the way down and look like it's coming in the door. And I would also say the same about your electrical light fix, or the electrical boxes that are holding your light fixtures on that flank the door. I think those are super likely spots where wind-driven rain could get in. And if you're observing right now, Greg, I'm going to point out that if you have a vented roof and you have a lot of wind, you can actually create negative air pressures that make water do all kinds of weird things, especially on a house with a lot of roof that is nearly vertical. I got to imagine that's going to create some weird pressure differences if the wind is coming across that roofing. So there you go.
Well done, Patrick.
Mm-hmm. I think we've hit just about every possibility that it could be.
I like your idea to test, Mike, because you could try and figure this out, and as you suggest, never track it down. And that's Diami's go-to strategy with roof leaks and dormers and what have you. And he's got a homemade rig to hold the spray nozzle, as Mike indicated, because you want to have some precision on where you're spraying, and you want to do it methodically so you know where it's coming from. Very good.
And one final thought, if you do, Greg, take that door out, there are flashing systems for the sides of the door that you're not counting on a caulking seal, where the flashing tape bonds to the jamb of the door, the outside edge of the jamb of the door, and then it's got these like wings of flashing tape that come out on the face, and then a second piece of tape that goes over the face, so that you can mock those up yourself. Or one product that's on the market that's an all-in-one is the DuPont Tyvek Straight Flash VF, and it's made for doing doors, and it gives you an extra barrier. Basically, you're putting flanges on your door, which makes it easier to flash than just relying on the sealant that on the sides of the door. So take those steps along with the sill pan if you do find that it's leaking somewhere around that perimeter, and you're going to have to take the door out anyway.
And Greg, good for you for not pretending this is not a problem. You're going to be happy you fixed this.
And you're lucky, Greg. A lot of people will be like, "Oh, I screwed up." No, you're very lucky, because you're discovering it
now
on the subfloor layer now. I have repaired so many houses where 4, 10, 20, 30 years later, this little bit of leak which goes to the subfloor, but it's underneath the finished flooring, be it tile or be it hardwood or laminate or whatever. And then we're pulling out floor joists that are rotted, rim joists that are rotted, and it's just a real nightmare to repair. So you're lucky you caught it at this stage, so you can make a repair and not have the latent problem years from now.
Oh man, and dealing with this kind of problem when you have finished flooring in the way, and oh my gosh, it's such a bigger deal. This comes from Jeffrey. I bought my first house 2 years ago, and a friend pointed out that there may be flashing problems. As I look around the Fine Homebuilding and Green Building Advisor websites, I'm getting concerned that there aren't good flashings at several locations. The Cape-style house was built in the mid-50s in Massachusetts. About 10 years ago, it was sided with vinyl, and replacement windows were installed. It appears that they put the vinyl right over the original cedar shingles. All the trim and eaves on the house are covered with either vinyl or metal. My concern is what's happening behind the vinyl and metal where there should be flashing. I don't see any step flashing where the garage roof meets the house wall, and there are no kick-out flashings above the gutters. It looks like the vinyl siding was notched around the gutters where they dead end at the house, and the edges were just caulked to the gutter. The caulking is cracked and leaving open gaps. And I can't tell how the windows are flashed, if at all. I don't have any experience at home maintenance and wonder, should I be worried about what's going on behind the vinyl siding and the lack of visible flashing? Can the walls be rotting back there? Should I hire someone to take off the siding and trim in spots to have a look? Jeffrey, fantastic question. Who wants to go first?
Not me.
I guess that leaves me or Andres.
I think Brian and I are in the same boat, and I think we're both worried about what Jeffrey is going to find back here, and I bet you are too, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I always warn friends of mine when they're going to look at houses and they're looking at a home which has been vinyl sided over the original siding. And and it was recently done, just like it's a flip house, because that they're not really paying attention. They really could be covering up problems, and you're not going to see it for many years, or it may never be a problem. It's hard to know, and the only way to know is to take the vinyl off in suspect areas. But the nice thing about vinyl is it's pretty easy. With a zip tool, it's just a little J hook tool that you can unlock the hems on most vinyl siding, provided it's not the embossed cedar shingle kind of look, the shake shingle look. Those are a little bit harder to disengage. But if it's the clapboard style, lap siding style, you can unlock those, and then you can take a look. But often you won't see those step flashings along a wall where the roof meets a wall, because the people who put the vinyl on probably did what they're not supposed to do, according to the Vinyl Siding Institute, and they jammed the J channel right down to the roof surface. You're supposed to have a minimum of 3/4 of an inch, whether it's new or retrofit, for a view strip, so that you can check the flashing and re-roof easily. So it's probably concealed. And then often most houses don't have kick-out flashing, so that's not unusual. Where the gutter is trimmed around, it's unfortunate that they didn't trim the gutter back. It's not a hard thing to do with a pair of metal snips. Just cut the gutter and put a new end cap on so that the vinyl goes behind it. It shouldn't have cut around it like that and just caulked it, but that's commonly done. So you could hire somebody and have them do an evaluation, and they can unzip a few panels and see what's going on, but there's no remedy for it without stripping it all back, stripping the original siding off, and then doing all new flashings to today's standards, I guess, which is very costly and probably not something you want to do.
Jeffrey, I would
Just
point
sell
out.
the house and move on.
Sell the house. Jeffrey, I would say that the good part of this situation is that vinyl siding allows a lot of drying. So if water is getting behind the siding, it's going to be more forgiving than if you'd covered up the original cedar shingle siding with something else. I can almost guarantee that whoever wrapped the windows and other trim elements with aluminum trim coil, at least in some places, is diverting water behind it, just because that's seldom part of best practice in that business. But have a good carpenter look at this place and make sure that there's no bulk water getting into the enclosure. And, my guess is it's going to be just fine, because the vinyl can dry relatively easily. And it's a hard fix, like Mike points out. It's a shame someone did this, but it happens every day. What do you think, Mike, when you see old windows wrapped in trim coil? I bet you kind of shudder, right? You're terrified of that.
Because what's behind there is a bunch of rotted wood trim. And the worst is always at that old sill, because the only way to do a good wrap with the aluminum on the sill is to yank out the windows, if it ever had replacement windows, and get that metal way up, and you gotta, it's not easy to do it right, and very few vinyl siders who are, it's a commodity, really. They're trying to do it really fast and just cover everything up and caulk it where it, where they shouldn't, and then it looks good. And that's what the homeowner sees, and it's many years later. A couple of my rental houses over the years, when I bought them, I knew it had vinyl siding and it had been hacked up, and I pulled it off, and there was rotted, very rotted sills and the bottom end of the window cases because of that metal that was wrapped around it.
And as you point out, no one knows what's going on back there until you get a windstorm and the aluminum trim coil blows off the window casing or off the, right? And or it's just hanging there by one nail with nothing behind it.
And the reason there's only one nail isn't because they only put one nail in. It's because everything under it rotted and the nails aren't holding anything.
Jeffrey, send us some pictures of how you what's behind there, because I think folks who listen to the podcast, many are dealing with this kind of situation and are probably curious what's going on with your house. Casey writes in, "Dear FHB podcast hosts and contributors, thank you for providing this outstanding resource for those seeking to understand buildings and prove the work they do. I'm looking for advice on insulating knee walls in the attic in a 1978 home we purchased last year. It's located in central Michigan on the border of climate zones 5A and 6A. The attached picture and crude drawing show the details for the relevant parts of the house. The steeply pitched steel roof is 4 years old and was installed on purlins over the old shingles. There is no roof venting, only the screen gable vents. The home has forced air heat for the daylight basement and main floor, and there's electric resistive baseboard heat for the second story. There are no plans for air conditioning. There is poly sheeting behind the drywall everywhere except the ceilings. The knee wall attics are not intentionally ventilated as of now. The knee wall attics are connected to the main attic by fiberglass batts in the sloped ceiling that has sagged considerably and were at some point perforated by pests. The construction of the eaves is hard to assess and harder to access due to the chalet-style overhangs. I have found good resources for dealing with the walls and floor of the knee wall spaces on GBA, FHB, and the Department of Energy sites. I plan to apply foam board sealed to the walls and install blocking between the joists. The main attic insulation has been removed. We will air seal the ceiling plane and add a deep layer of blown cellulose and when other work is complete. What should I do with the sloped ceiling, though? I need to maintain some ventilation to the main attic to avoid moisture problems, I'm assuming. There are no signs of mold-like substances in the knee wall or main attic, so I do not want to make a problem in the future. I've tried removing a couple fiberglass batts in that slope ceiling section of the attic, and it's easy enough to do. There are some screws poking through the sheathing, but given the steep pitch and access from the attic, I feel I could fabricate and install foam baffles to maintain the ventilation space across this part of the roof. I would apply metal mesh to the bottoms of the rafters to stop the insulation from moving and stop any potential critters from getting in. 3, I would install dense packed cellulose between the drywall and baffles from the attic. I understand this is slow and tedious work, but I want to get it right and would appreciate hearing your thoughts on this plan if there are any alternatives or considerations I am missing. Thanks in advance for your advice on this and all the other topics you address. Sincerely, Casey. Brian, do you want to try and explain Casey's assembly here? It's pretty typical, right?
Yeah, it's very typical. You have a cape with a kind of standard gable, at least from what we can see here. And in the living space underneath the roof, you have these short knee walls. And so Casey's plan, to add blocking in the floor system below for air sealing, to use rigid foam to air seal the back of the knee walls so that you're creating this air barrier that goes from the knee walls down to the down to the ceiling, I guess, below, and then connects to the ceiling, in the space. That's all a good one. That plan's all good. What I didn't really understand is if they plan to gut the space, or if it sounds like no. It sounds like that because Casey mentioned trying to pull fiberglass trying to pull fiberglass bats out. So it sounds like they don't plan on gutting the space. But I do want, one of the things that always comes to mind in these situations with all this work that you're going to do, I wonder if it's actually worth taking down the drywall and making it a lot easier to get it right. Casey mentioned wanting to get it right, and that would make it a lot easier. Another interesting thing about this roof assembly
Wait, but I want to touch on why you think that makes sense to do. I'm guessing you want to increase the insulation depth. You want to maintain the ventilation space. Why? What is your rationale for pulling down the plaster?
Well, it's going to make doing the work a lot easier. For one thing, you could potentially insulate the roof line down to the eaves instead of carrying it down the knee walls, which is trickier to do, especially working in an enclosed space. Creating that air sealing that jogs up from the exterior walls along the floor system, up the knee wall, and then onto the roof plane. That's a lot of, tricky air sealing to get right. So if you open this up and you can now just air seal and insulate the roof line down to the top plates, life just got a little bit easier. So that's one of the recommendations. It seems like it just seems like a lot of work to try to work around, the wall finish and ceiling finish, when taking that down would make it a lot easier to get right.
I interrupted you, and you were about to say another interesting thing about Casey's wall assembly.
Roof assembly is that it has some venting above the roof deck, because the steel roofing is on purlins. So there's actually that's not necessarily it's not necessarily going to be as effective as a eave to ridge roof vent, but there's an airspace there. If I'm understanding the construction right. So in other words, there's going to be some drying to the exterior, which makes it a better candidate. Everyone knows I don't like to recommend spray foam, but it makes it a better candidate for maybe just if you did gut the space and want to get the air sealing and insulating done as effectively as possible. It makes it a good candidate for.
And it's a day's project instead of a week's worth of tedious air sealing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these projects are always, you have to figure out. There's so many roofs. I mean, I think that's why they're perpetual questions, right? These roof insulating, ventilating, air sealing details, because it's sort of problem solving. Right, you don't typically have the space that you want to get the insulation that you want. You have these knee walls and these details that make air sealing challenging. So, it's always coming up with the best possible result for each particular project.
Mike, what would you do if this was your house?
I think Brian's description is pretty much what I do. I take out the drywall and run my continuous thermal and air control layers from where the exterior wall meets the floor joist for that upper loft area, and then go right up and over the ceiling and down. It just simplifies everything. And you can also do a modified bond fig on your roof and cut down on your thermal bridging. You can, there's lots of opportunities. You can, increase the rafter cavity space to get more insulation. So it's a one-time opportunity if you're going to do the work and you want to do it right, is that taking some or all the drywall down to do it would give you more options to increase your performance.
I think we should point out something too that you said, Brian, about the drying. Because the metal roofing is on purlins, you suggested that you might get some drying, which moisture accumulation is our worry, right? We don't want the seasonal moisture to be building up in the sheathing. But the research I've read is that asphalt shingles allow no drying, or virtually no drying. So, we need to dry to the inside, and, I think that's going to affect whether you choose to ventilate or how much spray foam insulation you need to install, because that's going to control vapor movement better than fibrous type insulation.
It's unfortunate that they didn't strip the old roof off, because then they would have been more vapor open to the exterior.
Oh, I missed that. I'm sorry. So correct that. I missed that. The purlins are installed over the old roofing.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So I take back what I said. No drying to the exterior.
Yeah. Doesn't that defy logic, though? Of all the like building science principles I've learned in the decades doing this, that was one that might have surprised me the most, is to learn that shingles allow no drying, and because they seem like they would be open, right? They would allow air.
I think it does probably depend on the era of the shingles. If they're old enough, there's probably some permeance through them. If they're the old organic felt shingles, which could be, one of the reasons it's a very old place and they put on the metal over it. But if they're newer modern shingle with a self-seal strip that really bonds well, as opposed to the old 3-tab shingles that didn't bond real well, then yeah, you're not going to get the vapor permeance that you wish you could have through it.
I think, as Casey suggests, and Brian too, this is a common scenario. And if you folks listening to the show have thoughts on how you've dealt with this common problem of the, story and a half house, please let us know, because it is a regular topic of conversation on the podcast. And one of the joys of my job is I get to write the web copy that accompanies the podcast page. And today's episode, I don't know if you guys check this out when you're looking at it, but the episode title is Leaky Doors, Leaky Flashing, and Leaky Knee Walls. And I think it sets a theme for what the podcast questions are often about. And unfortunately, we're still dealing with these issues, and you are too. So if you have thoughts on those leaks, other leaks, or anything about the podcast, I hope you'll write in with your emails. Thanks very much. You guys have any words of wisdom for our listeners before we go?
I like these questions because these are good questions, because all of them we could actually give some good guidance on. Sometimes we get questions where it's kind of hard to come up with a real good answer, but these were all good, solid questions. And yeah.
Well, I thank you all for listening, and thanks very much for your feedback. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Mike, Brian, and Andres for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to FHBpodcast at finehomebuilding.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everyone. Keep craft alive. Thanks a lot for listening.